Dude, I absolutely called this. I called this in 2012. So I met and spent a few hours with Rex, the guy who's in custody for the Gilboa Beach murders, back in 2012. And within that small time frame, I knew it. Like, I was like, dude, this guy's out there murdering people. And when I got home from meeting him, I even Googled it, like serial killers on the East Coast or serial killers in New York City. And I came across articles about the Long Island serial killer. That's what my memory says. Same cases, same area. So I think that's what it used to be called, but just crazy. I have stuff to say, but I don't know if I want to share it. So there were many reasons why I didn't go to the police about Rex back in 2012, the guy that is now in custody for the Gilboa Beach murders. One, I was in a particular line of work where I wouldn't have been considered a reliable witness. And two, I didn't have any evidence. It was just suspicion. Three, because of my profession, I could have been in trouble if I had gone to the police. And four, in 2012, I had just started having extreme symptoms of PTSD. PTSD from other events in my life and PTSD from Rex. I was diagnosed with panic disorder, anxiety disorder, agoraphobia. I was in no mental state to deal with the police in that situation at the time. Plus, like I said, it was suspicion. I thought, oh my gosh, this guy could be the Long Island serial killer. But talking about this isn't easy for me. I don't like to revisit this part of my life. Um, so back in 2012, the guy who's in custody for the Gilboa Beach murders paid for my round trip tickets from the West Coast to the East Coast and put me up in a Four Seasons hotel in New York City. And then he picked me up for dinner that evening. He had like rented one of those big black SUV things that you can use like a taxi service in New York. He was in the back of the SUV, and he picked me up in that. We went to something that looked like just a tiny little pizza restaurant, but there was a door that you open and you go downstairs, and it was like this underground restaurant bar thing. And we went there for dinner. And I should start by saying before meeting Rex, I was told by the person who set this up that he was into true crime and serial killers, and I knew that going into it. It was also, we had that in common. I have textbook sized books about serial killers, about psychopaths, sociopaths, the criminal mind, because it's always been something that, not always, but like around 19, 20, maybe like early 20s, I started reading about that kind of stuff because it just intrigued me how someone can do such terrible things and feel absolutely okay. So, anyways, we shared that in common. So I knew going into it that we may be talking about that kind of stuff. While we were at dinner, he made small talk. We talked about, I can't even remember, just small talk. And then eventually we did happen upon the subject of serial killers. And he said some alarming things that made me feel somewhat unsafe. And I'll need a part two. I'm almost out of time. Okay, this is part two of my evening with Rex, the guy who's in custody for the Gilboa Beach murders. So like I was saying, Rex flew me from West Coast to the East Coast, put me up in a Four Seasons hotel, picked me up for dinner. We were at dinner, started with small talk. Then we started talking about serial killers, which I knew was going to happen. Like I said in the last video, I knew it was a common interest that we had. But when we started talking about serial killers, it felt like he was not so much interested in the criminal mind and the serial killers themselves, but more so into the murders. And one of the things that he said, he asked me, who's your favorite serial killer? And I can't remember what I said, but he followed up with telling me that his favorite serial killer was the duo, the Hillside Stranglers, and I think they were based out of LA. But he went on to say that the reason that the Hillside Stranglers were his favorite were because they tortured their victims before they strangled them, and he liked the close-up, intimate strangulation that took place in those murders, and then that made me feel very uneasy on top of everything else, like the way that he was discussing this with me. But then um, the next thing that I remember is him asking me, so do you think serial killers are still around? Or do you think like social media or the internet has made it so um, they no longer exist? And I was like, oh, well, I think they're just still around. And he said, you're right. They've just gotten smarter. As in a way to tell me like that he knew. Um, and I think he gets off making people feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Um, and then after we were done discussing serial killers at that during that dinner, uh, he started asking me questions like, "Who knows that you're here? Do they know what you do for a living? Do they know where you're staying in New York City?" And so my gut instinct was to lie and tell him everyone knew where I was. My parents, my siblings, my boyfriend, they all knew where I was and what I did. Um, there's more I could say. I'm out of time.